Hello everyone, it's Old Guardian here. Last night, the Angry Chicken podcast interviewed one of Hearthstone's game designers, Cora Georgiou. There's a link down below in the description of the podcast if you want to hear everything yourself. But in this video, I'm going to make a short recap of what Cora talked about on the podcast, especially when it comes to Warrior, because she had some things to say about Warrior, and Warrior is one of my favorite classes, so something that I'm keenly interested in. But overall, first of all, it started by talking about Hearthstone's 2022, and well, Hearthstone's 2022 was a stellar success according to Cora. Sunken City was a huge success, Castle Nathria the best expansion from a narrative and flavor point of view. I agree, Nathria had like really wonderful hype. We can see from all the statistics about Hearthstone's popularity that Nathria had great hype, and like people were really excited about the Nathria team. But Cora said that mechanically it was weaker than Sunken City, and we can also see that from all the statistics, because once players got to play Nathria, well, they weren't that excited anymore. But flavor-wise, yeah, Nathria was great. And March of the Lich King, massive win for Hearthstone, players loved that night. So overall, just hyping things up. But don't worry, there are some more tangible stuff coming as well. Then Cora was asked about Hearthstone's Holy Trinity, the Castle Nathria neutral legendary cards, and when they shipped Renatal, they really didn't have a good idea of how strong Renatal was. They figured, hey, 40-40, that seems kind of okay. Let's ship it, maybe it's fine, maybe it's too strong, we'll find out eventually. And yeah, well, they shipped it. And then they later on nerfed it, even though it was actually fine from a wild perspective, just not that fine from a standard perspective. So I really hope that they're going to unnerf Renatal eventually when it moves to wild, so that we can enjoy the card in wild where the power level is more suitable for it. But anyway, Blizzard didn't really have a clue about what kind of power level Renatal has, but they shipped it anyway. Then Sire Denatrius, according to Cora, Sire Denatrius was strong, but there was nothing wrong with it. It was still a completely fine card. And then Teotar. And Teotar, Cora described that Teotar is a wacky character in World of Warcraft. It's a great character in World of Warcraft, by the way. So they really wanted to have some kind of a wacky design for Teotar. And then they decided on that design that they ended up with, and it was too strong, and it took them some time before they were able to correct Teotar to the appropriate power level with balance changes. Cora also talked about Death Knight. She is thrilled with where Death Knight has ended up with. They experimented with mixing runes internally before the release, but they didn't really find anything too special and decided to pursue that avenue more in later expansions. But she's in love with how players have managed to get Rainbow Death Knight to work, just getting all sorts of runes to work, even though it was not really intended. The designers didn't really plan for that to work, and actually looking at statistics it doesn't really work that well, but she's excited about it anyway. Then she reiterated something that has been said in previous interviews, and I have pointed it out on this channel previously as well, that because they don't have a lot of cards for a single class in a single expansion, they will not be able to hit every rune. They will not be able to support every rune in every expansion when Death Knight gets the normal amount of cards. So then they're going to just check, okay, what runes have they supported before, what has gotten support recently, what are some holes that they could easily fix, and try to mix and mash something together for Death Knight for every expansion. But supporting every rune like they did with March of the Lich King will not be possible. Personally, I consider that to be a huge design problem, but she didn't seem to think it that way. And then we reached the Warrior. There was a lot of talk about Warrior, and one of Cora's biggest regrets for 2022 is how weak Warrior was. And when they shipped Castle Nathria, they knew that Enraged Warrior was weak. But if balance changes could, this is according to Cora, if balance changes could bring Warrior in line without causing problems like Nelly and From the Depths, they would have gone in that direction. Personally, I just can't. This is an unfathomable statement to me. This is basically saying that the Warrior cards are so fundamentally flawed that they cannot balance Warrior to be better. I have given suggestions on how to balance Warrior better before. Like, for example, Enraged Warrior would be the easiest archetype to balance. Enraged Warrior currently has all the tools it needs. Basically, with proper balancing, Enraged Warrior could be a top tier deck or a tier 2 deck or whatever tier deck you want it to be. But according to Cora, Warrior problems are so fundamental that balance changes cannot fix Warrior. If they could, they would have done so. Anyway, they have a year-long plan to bring Warrior back, and Cora hopes that it will be back sooner than after the full year, but they have a full year plan over the next 3 sets to bring Warrior back. And all of that begins with the core set. Warrior is going to have cool stuff in the core set, and they put emphasis on reinforcing Control Warrior of all things, although fatigue no longer works. So they want to give players a different route that still feels like Control Warrior, and they want to give players interesting ways to play Control Warrior and end games as Control Warrior, but not playing as Control Warrior has been played before. Just something that feels like Control Warrior even though it doesn't do Control Warrior stuff. And in order to do that, they have a 1-year plan, and within the next 3 expansions we should see major improvements to Warrior. And finally they discussed content cadence, and Cora said that balance cadence is now better than it has been in the past, although to make that statement we have to take into account that a couple of years ago it was better than it was now, because now they completely missed the early January buff patch which they were able to deliver in 2020 and in 2021, but they have not been able to deliver it again now. So they have actually forgotten how to do balance cadence, but now they think they're still better than they were before, but they're learning and improving and something. And then minisets were discussed, and minisets do not give a big comeback moment, but they are an approachable way for non-hyper competitive players to get content without a major investment. Because there has been some talk within the team about making 4 sets a year and no minisets instead of 3 sets and minisets, but there are a couple of problems with that. It would be good for the meta, but it would make the game more expensive and it would be a taxing schedule for the designers. I mean, obviously, it depends on kind of the perspective that you take. Like, if you take the perspective of a single designer in a team, yeah, if I release more cards, then with the current monetization, it's going to be more expensive. But who makes the monetization? Like, who decides on the monetization? I mean, it's Blizzard, the same company that publishes this game. No one is forcing Blizzard to take a certain amount of money per card. Blizzard is completely in control of how expensive Hearthstone is, and if Blizzard wanted this to be a better game with 4 sets a year, and they wanted it to still cost the exact same for the players, they could easily do that. I mean, they have complete control of the monetization. So, yeah, that sort of statement. But this year they are going to spice things up, and they're going to make more impactful minisets. What does a more impactful miniset? Why didn't they do more impactful minisets before then? Well, I mean, minisets have had very, very different power levels. Some of the minisets have actually been pretty strong. And the more recent minisets, 2022 minisets, were not as strong as 2021 minisets. So, more impactful minisets, but on the other hand, there have been more impactful minisets in the past, and then they stopped doing those, and yeah. Well, that was quite an interview. Thank you for watching. Click like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and a special thanks to all of my Patreon supporters, YouTube members and Twitch subscribers who make all of these videos possible.